You're back for more. We're covering 4chan threads tonight that are genuinely unsettling, the kind that make people uncomfortable. These posts are unfiltered and twisted. Hit like, subscribe, sound up, and we're in. The call came in at 11:47 on a Tuesday in early December. Structure fire, Larimer Avenue, 3rd floor, occupants reported, 6 minutes from the house. Pittsburgh in December is its own thing. The air off the Allegheny has this wet cold that sits in your bones through the turnout gear, and by the time we rolled up the hill, you could already see the glow. Old brick walk-up from the 20s, 4 stories, bakery on the ground floor that had closed during the shutdowns and never opened back up. 3rd floor windows were blown out, black smoke rolling straight up, no wind. That's bad, means it's hungry and pulling from inside. I was riding with Deke that night. 19 years on the job, had this habit of tapping the doorframe of the rig twice before stepping out on any run. Never talked about it, just did it. Marco was on the nozzle, and there was a kid we'd only had 3 months. Everyone called him Book because he came in from the academy quoting the manual like scripture. 4 of us on the interior team. Command met us on the sidewalk. 2 apartments occupied on the 3rd floor. Neighbor said the guy in 3B had been screaming earlier, then it went quiet, then the smoke started. Nobody had seen him come out. Deke looked at me. You and Book take 3B, me and Marco have 3A. The stairwell was hot before we got to the second landing, that kind of heat where your ears feel wrong under the hood, too close to your skull. Book was breathing loud on the SCBA, and I told him to slow it down. The door to 3B was already off its hinges. The neighbor maybe tried to get in and gave up. Inside was that orange dark you only see in real fires, where you can't tell the ceiling from the floor because everything is the same moving color. We went low. I brought up the thermal cam. Kitchen to the right, fully involved. Stove was a white blob on the screen. To the left, hallway, and past that, what should have been the living room. That's where the cam showed something I've never seen before or since. A cold spot. Not cold like outside, cold relative to everything around it. On the screen, the whole apartment was screaming yellow, and there was this one round patch of blue, dead center of the living room, maybe 10 feet across. I tapped the screen because I thought the sensor had frozen up. It hadn't. Book saw it too. The hell is that? I told him to keep the hose ready and stay behind me. We pushed down the hall. The wallpaper was gone. Not burned off in strips, just gone, like the walls had been scraped. In the doorway to the living room I stopped, and I want to say I stopped because I was reading the room. That's not why. I stopped because it didn't make sense. The living room was black, charred to the studs on every wall, ceiling open to the joists, one of them still burning slow and dripping. Floor was ash. Couch was a metal frame. TV was a puddle, and in the middle of it, sitting cross-legged, was a man. The floor under him wasn't burned. There was a circle around him where the carpet was still carpet. Beige, cheap, the kind landlords put down between tenants. You could see the pattern on it. Outside the circle, ash. Inside, carpet. The edge was clean, not ragged, not smudged. Clean, like somebody had traced it with a compass. I put it at 3 meters across, 10 feet, give or take. I stepped closer, and the toe of my boot crossed the line, and one half was on soft fibers, and the other half was crunching through what used to be someone's living room. He was maybe 40. White t-shirt, no shoes, jeans. His shirt was clean, not a smudge on it. His hair wasn't singed, hands flat on his knees, looking straight ahead at where the window used to be. He was calm, not shocked, not crying. Calm the way people are calm in a doctor's waiting room. Book was behind me saying my name. I heard him, but it was far away. I crouched down, still just inside the circle. Sir, we need to get you out. Can you hear me? Are you injured? He turned his head slow and looked at me. Eyes were fine, no red, no watering. In a room where I could barely see through the smoke with a mask on, he was breathing like he was on a park bench. He said, I asked him to stop. That's what he said. Quiet, not to me exactly. Like he was finishing a sentence he'd started before I got there. Asked who to stop, sir. I don't know why I asked. Training says get them out first, questions later. I asked anyway. He didn't answer. He just looked back at the window. I keyed my mic and called for a second team. Book was already on the hose, hitting the joist above us, and I felt the heat drop a notch. I put my hand on the guy's shoulder to guide him up. His shirt was cool, not warm, not hot. Cool, like he'd been sitting in a basement. He stood when I pulled. No resistance. He walked with me, careful, and when he crossed the edge of the circle, he looked down at his bare feet on the ash and made a small sound. Not pain, more like he'd just remembered something. We got him down the stairs to the medics on the sidewalk. He sat on the back step of the bus and let them put a blanket on him, and he answered their questions in the same flat, quiet voice. Name, date of birth, address, all correct. Blood pressure a little high, pulse normal, no burns, no soot in his airway when they scoped him. Nothing. The investigators showed up around 3 in the morning. 2 of them, plus a guy from the county I hadn't seen on a scene before. They spent a long time in that living room with flashlights and a tape measure. I heard the older one with the mustache say the word impossible twice, low, to his partner. Then he caught me looking and shut up. The circle was still there when the sun came up. You could see it better in daylight. The edge really was that clean. They photographed it from 6 angles, took carpet samples from inside and outside the line, took ash. Took air readings from 3 heights. I asked Deke later what he thought. He was leaning on the rig, drinking coffee out of a paper cup, and he took a long time to answer. Then he said, "I think we tell the report what the report needs to hear, and we go home." The official cause came back a week later. Electrical, kitchen, standard. There was a paragraph near the end about anomalous fire behavior in the living room area, attributed to atypical aeration patterns from compromised window glazing. I read it twice. It didn't say anything. The guy was kept overnight at Allegheny General for observation and released the next afternoon. Mild shock, no physical trauma. He signed himself out, gave the intake nurse an address on the north side that turned out to be a laundromat. I went by there in January on my own time in plain clothes, just to see. The woman running the place had never heard of him. She looked at the picture I'd printed off the incident report, shook her head, and went back to folding towels. I still work out of the same house. Deke retired last spring, book transferred to Squad 4. Sometimes, on slow nights, the new guys ask about weird calls, the way new guys do, and I tell them a couple of the easy ones. The kitchen grease fire where the cat was fine, the car in the river. I don't tell them about the circle. I don't know how to end that story. Long haul out of Roanoke, headed for a distribution yard outside Charleston, West Virginia. January 2022, the kind of night where the salt trucks had already been through and left the road striped white, and you could smell diesel and cold air every time the heater kicked on. I was on 64 West, coming up on the stretch that cuts through the mountains past Covington. If you've never driven it at night in winter, picture this. 2 lanes each way, guardrail on your right, and past the guardrail nothing. Just black. No towns for miles, no gas stations lit up, only mile markers, and the occasional reflector nailed to a tree. The radio doesn't do much through there either. You get maybe 1 AM station out of Beckley if the weather's right, and that night it wasn't, so I'd shut it off. I'd done that run maybe 40 times. I liked it, honestly. Quiet. My dispatcher was a woman named Deb. She'd radio in around 10 to check I was still awake, then leave me alone until the drop. My rig was a 2018 Freightliner, sleeper cab, big enough that you can hear how empty it is when nobody's in the passenger seat. It was around 1 in the morning when I saw him. He was standing on the shoulder maybe a quarter mile ahead, off to the right past the fog line. Tall guy, dark coat, no hat. One hand up, not waving frantic, not thumbing for a ride the way hitchhikers used to do, just holding his hand up flat, palm out, like he was flagging a cab in a city. I don't pick people up. Company policy, insurance policy, common sense policy. But it was maybe 9 degrees out there, and I didn't see a car anywhere. No hazards blinking, no shape on the shoulder that looked like a broken down vehicle. Just him and the guardrail and the dark past it. I slowed, told myself I'd roll past, get a good look, and if he seemed hurt, I'd call it in from the next exit. But my foot came off the accelerator on its own, and I was pulling over before I really decided to. Air brakes hissing, rig rocking on the shoulder. I hit the flashers. He walked up to the passenger side. Not fast, not slow. He climbed in and shut the door, and I remember thinking his coat looked wrong for the weather, more like a suit coat than a winter coat. But his face was calm, middle-aged, clean-shaven. Nothing about him made my stomach turn. "Appreciate it," he said. "Where are you headed?" "Same way you are for a while." That should have been the moment. I know that now. But at the time I just nodded and pulled back onto the highway, and we got up to speed, and the cab warmed up, and we started talking the way strangers talk in a truck at night. He asked how long I'd been driving this route. I told him a couple years. He asked if I knew the bad curve past the second tunnel, where a fuel tanker went over the guardrail back in the 90s. I said I'd heard about it. He said his cousin was one of the first responders on that call. Said the tanker burned so hot they had to close both directions until morning, and they were still finding pieces of it in the trees 2 summers later. The way he said it was flat. Not like he was telling a story, like he was reading it off a page. We talked about the weather. He said the front coming down from Ohio was going to drop another 6 inches by Wednesday. I said the roads were already garbage. He said something like, "The road's always been bad, people just forget." I laughed. He didn't. He asked if I had kids. I said no. He said that was probably for the best in this line of work. Long hours, bad food. I said yeah. I didn't ask him anything back. I don't know why. Something about the rhythm of him, the way he waited exactly the right amount of time before answering each question, made me not want to feed him more. The heater was running full blast and I was warm, but my hands on the wheel felt cold. Not shaking cold, just a slow, working cold. The kind you get when you've been holding a metal railing outside. We passed a mile marker I recognized. 35, maybe 36. I did the math in my head. I'd picked him up around mile 10. That was almost half an hour of driving, and I still didn't know where he wanted out. "So where can I drop you?" I said. "Next exit's Lewisburg in about 20. He didn't answer. I glanced over. The seat was empty. I want to be clear about this part because I've gone over it 100 times. I did not stop the truck between picking him up and that moment. Not once. I was doing 65, 67 the whole time. The passenger door hadn't opened. I would have heard it. You always hear it. The wind pulls at the cab and your ears pop a little. Nothing. And the door lock. On my rig, the passenger door locks from the inside, a little metal peg you push down with your finger. When I looked over, that peg was down. Locked. From the inside. I kept driving. I don't know why. Maybe because stopping felt worse than moving. I could hear my own breathing, and I could hear the tires on the salted road, and I could not hear anything that sounded like another person in that cab. Not a coat rustling, not a shoe on the mat, nothing. I got off at the next exit and pulled into a Sheetz that was open 24 hours. I parked at the back edge of the lot where the truckers usually park, killed the engine, and sat with my hands in my lap. There was one other rig running a few spots over, curtains drawn, driver probably asleep. I watched the passenger seat in the mirror above my head for about 2 hours. It never moved. Nothing did. Around 4 in the morning, I got out and walked around the truck. My boots crunched on the salt they'd thrown down by the pumps. I checked both doors. The passenger side was still locked from the inside. I unlocked it, opened it, looked in. The seat was clean, no dent in the fabric. No smell of aftershave or cigarettes or anything a person leaves behind. The mat on the floor was still flat the way it had been when I'd swept the cab in Roanoke that afternoon. I climbed back in, ran the heater, and waited for the sky to turn gray. When it finally did, it came in slow, one shade at a time, and I've never been so glad to see a dirty January morning. I got to the yard outside Charleston a little after 9, late by 2 hours, and I didn't call it in. The guy who takes the truck when I drop is a mechanic named Roy. Older, quiet, chews sunflower seeds. He was in the bay when I pulled in, wiping his hands on a rag. I don't usually talk to Roy. That morning I did. I told him what happened. All of it. The man on the shoulder, the coat, the tanker story, the empty seat, the lock. I could hear how it sounded coming out of my mouth. I said, "I know how this sounds." He didn't laugh. He didn't argue. He stood there with his hand on the fender of my truck and he looked at the ground for a long time. Longer than felt normal. Then he said, "You're not the first on that stretch." I waited for him to say more. He didn't. He took the keys from me and walked into the office, and that was it. I drove home and slept for about 14 hours. When I woke up, I called dispatch and asked to be moved off the West Virginia runs. Deb asked why. I said I just needed a change. She was quiet for a second, then said okay. She'd put me on the Carolinas route the following week. She didn't push. I think she'd heard something like this before and knew not to ask. I've been driving the Carolinas run ever since. Different mountains, different quiet. I don't pick anybody up, and nobody stands on my shoulder anymore with their hand raised flat like they're waiting for a cab. Sometimes at a truck stop, I'll hear another driver mention 64 West through Covington at night, and I'll listen, and I won't say anything. A couple of them get a look on their face when they talk about it. Not scared, just tired, like they know something they'd rather not know. I never asked Roy what he meant. I don't think he would have told me anyway. I've been working night audit at a motel off I-70 in Colorado for going on 4 years. Between Grand Junction and the Pass, 2 stories, cinder block, painted beige every decade whether it needs it or not. 42 rooms, ice machine that hums like a bad fridge. Vending machine only takes cash and eats every third dollar. You get to know the regulars. You get a feel for people, is what I want to say. Not psychic, nothing like that. You just start to notice when something sits wrong. The lobby at 2 in the morning is a quiet place. Just the ice machine and the hum off the sign out front. You have time to notice things. Faces, mostly. The first time the couple came in was late May of 2022. I remember because there'd been a hailstorm that week and the parking lot lights were still out. He walked in first. Tall, thin, maybe 72, windbreaker, even though it was hot. She stayed by the door. He asked for a single king, one night, paid cash, Nevada license, name Harold. She was Ruth on the second ID. Nothing weird about that. Older folks travel with cash all the time. I gave them $214, told them checkout was $11. He nodded. She smiled at the floor. They were gone by 7. Bed on one side had been slept in, other side hadn't. 2 weeks later, they came back. I didn't notice at first, but he handed me a Utah license this time, named Gerald. She was Marlene. Same faces, same windbreaker on him, same purse on her. I froze up for maybe 2 seconds, then I ran the card, gave them 118, said, "Have a good night." He nodded. She smiled at the floor. "I know what you're thinking. Just say something. Call the cops." But think about it from where I sit. It's 11 at night, I'm alone at the desk, the guy is old and quiet and paying cash, and I've got a stack of IDs on my counter every week from people with nicknames, expired addresses, ID from 3 states ago. Fake IDs at a motel off the highway isn't a felony you call in, it's a Tuesday. But I started paying attention. Third visit was in June. I was ready this time. He came in, she stayed by the door. I made small talk. "Weather's been something, huh? Where you folks headed?" He said east, just east. Didn't smile. I turned to her. "First time through here?" She looked at him, not for a second. She turned her whole head and waited, and he gave a little nod, and only then she said, "First time." I asked her name for the guest log, even though I already had it off the ID. She looked at him. He nodded. She said, "Marlene." The ID said Elaine. I didn't say anything. I put down Elaine, gave them $302. He paid cash, $68 and change. I said, "Have a good night." He nodded. She smiled at the floor. I started keeping a tally in the back of the shift log. Nothing formal, just dates. It didn't look like much on paper. 8 rows in 3 months, and any auditor would have shrugged. By August, they'd been in 8 times. 8. Different room every visit. He seemed to prefer upstairs, but not always. Different IDs. Always a matched pair, husband and wife. Always from a state we don't border. Always cash. Once he asked if we had rooms that didn't face the road. Once he asked if the door to 210 locked from the outside with a deadbolt or just the handle. Small questions, the kind you answer without thinking about. I want to be clear. He was never rude to her in front of me. Never grabbed her arm. Never raised his voice. If you'd seen them at a diner for 2 minutes, you'd have thought, sweet old couple, been married 50 years, probably finish each other's sentences. That's the part that got to me worst. Nothing you could point at, except the looking. Every question, every single one. "Would you like a receipt, ma'am?" She'd look at him. "Do you need extra towels?" She'd look at him. Once I asked if she was cold, because the lobby AC runs hard in August, and she was rubbing her arms. She looked at him. He said, "She's fine." The 8th visit was August 14th, a Sunday. Slow night, 1 truck in the lot, a family in 106 with a dog they hadn't declared. He came in first, like always. South Dakota license. I didn't even read the name. Single king, 1 night, cash. She stood by the door. He said he was going to move the car closer to the room because she had a bad hip and didn't like walking the lot. He went out. She stayed. I don't know why I did it right then. I'd thought about it for months and never done it. Maybe because he was outside and I could see him through the glass, walking slow toward their Buick. Maybe because she was standing there with her purse held in both hands in front of her, like a kid in a school photo. I leaned forward over the counter, quiet. "Ma'am, if you need help, I can make a call, right now, before he comes back in." She looked at me. Not at the door, not at the parking lot, at me. And it wasn't the tired look I'd been catching in flashes for 3 months, that quick thing she did when he wasn't watching. It was longer than that. She looked at me for what felt like 10 seconds, and I couldn't read her face at all. I've thought about that face 100 times since. I still can't read it. Then she said, "No, we're going to see the children." That was all. She didn't smile. She didn't look at the floor. She just said it and looked back at the door, and I heard the Buick pull up outside, and he came in and took the key and said thanks, and they walked out together, and she got in the passenger side, and he closed her door for her, gentle, the way you'd close a door for someone you loved. They stayed in 220, left before 6. The card key was on the pillow, the way he always left it. I did call somebody, not the police, because I didn't know what to tell them. I called the national hotline for domestic abuse the next morning from my kitchen, sitting there in my work clothes because I hadn't slept. I told the woman on the other end everything, the IDs, the looking, what she said, what she didn't say. I asked what I was supposed to do. The woman was kind. She wasn't in a hurry. She told me that unless the person being harmed asks for help, directly, on their own, there's almost nothing anybody can do. Not me, not the cops, not a shelter. She said sometimes people say no because they're scared, and sometimes people say no because it isn't what I think it is at all, and there's no way from the outside to know which. She said the best thing I could do was be someone she remembered, in case she ever came back on her own. I said okay, I thanked her, I hung up. They haven't been back since August. It's been a while now. I still work the desk. Every time an older couple walks into the lobby, I look up too fast. Before they pulled out that last morning, I wrote down the plate off the Buick. South Dakota tag, 6 characters. I have it on a post-it in the drawer under the register. I copied it to my phone and to a notebook at home. I don't know what I'll do with it. Probably nothing. Probably they were exactly what he said. An old couple going to see their kids, and I made a story out of a shy woman and her tired husband. But she looked at me for 10 seconds, and I keep the plate, just in case someone ever asks. I was 23 when I got the job at the paper in Charleston. Weekly, not daily, county stuff, school boards, ribbon cuttings, my first real newsroom. The coffee pot had been running since the Reagan administration, and the carpet still smelled like it. Ray was the editor, 60-something, had run the place for maybe 20 years. He hired me over the phone after a 15-minute conversation, said he liked that I was from a town he'd never heard of. I remember thinking that was a weird reason to hire someone. Turned out it was the honest one. The story started in March. A woman called the office about her tap water, said it foamed, said her kid had a rash that wouldn't quit. Ray put her through to me because I was the new guy, and answering phones was part of the deal. I drove out that Saturday. She lived off a 2-lane road east of town, past the truck stop and a church with a sign that always said the same thing about being ready. Her water did foam. She ran it in the sink for me. It looked like someone had poured a shot of dish soap in a glass. She had a folder, printouts of state DEP reports she'd requested herself, photos of the creek behind her property, notes with dates. She'd been keeping records for 2 years. Nobody had ever called her back. I took the folder home and read it that night on my apartment floor. There was a plant about 4 miles upstream from her house, Ridgeline Industrial. They made coatings for something, I still couldn't tell you what. The DEP reports listed 3 violations in 18 months, all settled quietly. All under a dollar amount that meant nothing to a company that size. I spent 3 weeks on it, talked to 7 other households on the same stretch of road. 2 of them had health complaints that lined up. I got a former lab tech at Ridgeline on the phone. He talked for 40 minutes and let me record it. He wouldn't put his name on paper, but he told me which storage tank had been leaking and roughly when. I cross-checked what he said against the DEP filings. It matched. I wrote it up. 1,500 words, tight, everything sourced twice. I put it on Ray's desk on a Tuesday. He didn't say anything about it until Friday. Then he called me into his office and said it was good work, real good, and that we'd run it in 2 weeks. Room in the paper, he said. He wanted to give it space. 2 weeks came and went. I asked him about it. He said his backup piece was in the shop and we'd bumped it. Sure, I said. Another week. He asked me to come in and go through it with him. He had it printed out with red pen in the margins. Nothing about facts. He wanted words changed. Wanted leak to become release. Wanted residents reported instead of residents documented. Wanted a paragraph pulled that quoted the lab tech because it read like an accusation, his words. I pushed back a little, not much. It was my first job, and he'd been doing this since I was in elementary school. He said, "Trust me, kid, this'll still land, we just want to be careful." Water stories are lawsuits waiting to happen. That last part was true, technically. I made the changes. Not all of them. I kept the lab tech quote and moved it lower. Handed it back on a Monday. Wednesday, he called me in again. This time he was standing by the window with his back to me. He said we needed to pull the company name. Just call it a nearby industrial facility. Everyone in the county would know who it was anyway, he said. That was enough. That's the first time something in me went cold. Not dramatic, just a small, quiet drop. I asked why. He said the same thing about lawsuits. Then he said something about how we had to think about the paper, the staff, the payroll. I said okay, and left his office. I went back to my desk and did something I probably should have done in week 1. I pulled the last 6 months of the paper and made a list of every display ad that had run more than twice, half page and up. I did it on a legal pad because the printer was jammed and I didn't want anyone to see the screen. Ridgeline was in there, not by that name, under a subsidiary, same address on file, same P.O. box for billing, quarter-page ad, back of the business section, every issue for at least 2 years, corporate community message stuff, safety awards, scholarship programs, the kind of thing that costs a company nothing and makes them look like a neighbor. I sat with that for a night. Then I did something I hadn't planned to do. There's a regional paper out of Roanoke that had a Charleston stringer. I'd met their guy at a county commission meeting in February. Older, quiet, glasses on a chain. I called him from my car in the Kroger parking lot on Saturday morning. Told him I had a story my paper wouldn't run. Told him why. Told him I had documents, tape, sources, and a woman with 2 years of notes who'd go on the record. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Send me everything and let me make a call." Monday morning, I emailed him the full draft, the DEP reports, the audio file, and the woman's phone number with her permission. I also sent him a short note explaining that my own editor had asked me to strip the company name after sitting on the story for a month, and that the company was one of our advertisers. I told him he could use that part or not. He used it. The piece ran 8 days later. Front of the state section, company named, lab tech quoted, woman quoted, and a paragraph near the bottom about how the story had originated at a smaller Charleston weekly, whose editor had declined to publish it, and that the reporter had brought it forward independently. My byline. Ray's name was in the story too. I was at my desk when it came out. The paper hit the racks around 11. Ray walked past my desk twice that morning without looking at me. Then he closed his office door, and it stayed closed. He didn't call me in. He didn't email. Nobody said anything to me the rest of the day. I finished a piece on a school lunch program and went home. That night, the stringer from Roanoke called and told me his editor wanted to talk. We talked Tuesday. Wednesday, I had an offer letter in my inbox for a full staff job, starting salary about 40% higher than what Ray was paying me. I typed my resignation Thursday morning, 1 paragraph. I didn't CC anyone. I slid it under Ray's office door before he came in and left my key on the desk next to my empty mug. He never called, never wrote. I ran into him once, about a year later, at a gas station on Washington Street. He saw me by the pumps. He looked at me for maybe a second, then looked back at the pump handle and finished filling his tank without a word. The woman with the folder called me a few months after the story ran. The DEP had opened a new review. Ridgeline had settled with 3 families on her road. Her kid's rash was gone. She said thank you, and I told her she'd done the work. I just typed it up. That was mostly true. That's where we step back from the void and call it quits for now. You've got my thanks for seeing this through to the end. What story is going to haunt your dreams? Tell me below. There's no shortage of material in the archive. Don't wander alone. See you next time.